His eyes see the black hole. He doesn't care. The final brutal reality about the last human alive is this. We romanticize the end, imagining profound philosophical final moments. But the real failure won't be cosmic. It will be purely cellular. It will be agonizingly boring. It will be the total systemic shutdown of a highly specialized ape brain, built above all else for crowds. Stop thinking about supernovae. Forget the slow, majestic heat death of the universe. The last human won't die from external entropy. They will die from a catastrophic failure of internal, manufactured purpose. We are not philosophers contemplating eternity. We are highly anxious herd animals. That is the inescapable biological reality we built an entire civilization to ignore. Loneliness, you see, is not merely a feeling. Loneliness is a profound, destructive neurochemical defect. Think about the structure of consciousness itself. It evolved as a tool, an incredibly expensive calculation engine designed to navigate complex social hierarchies, predict immediate dangers from rivals, and secure mating opportunities. Its cost is astronomical in terms of metabolic load. So when the last social signal disappears, when there is no rival, no echo, no potential mate to impress, that engine of survival, that magnificent greedy brain, registers absolute redundancy. It fundamentally concludes, I am useless, and it just turns off. We were programmed from the Paleolithic to transmit social data. Without reception, the transmitter commits evolutionary suicide. This death is not fast. It is a slow, neurological starvation. The ultimate existential horror isn't watching the stars fade. It is realizing that the part of your brain responsible for processing meaning relies entirely on the presence of others. Without the friction of competition, without the pressure of comparison, without the need to explain or justify your actions to another mirrored consciousness, the structures of self-identity begin to crumble. That's the real endgame. The last human will realize they are no longer an individual, only a biological artifact waiting for decomposition. Pure chemistry. Most people prefer the comforting lie. They crave the narrative of the noble pioneer, the heroic survivor, standing tall against the void. They want the poetry. I offer you the autopsy report. If you are one of the few who prefer the harsh cutting edge of truth, the raw, uncomfortable science of what we really are, stripped bare of our self-flattering mythology, then you should probably be paying very close attention to this deep dive. You belong here, confronting the dark mechanics of reality. The mechanisms that sustain our awareness demand constant challenge. They demand problems. We call this engagement, we call it curiosity. But evolution calls it the ceaseless hunt for stimuli that validate resource allocation. Competition is the lifeblood of our advanced neural networks. When the last human is left staring at the cosmic microwave background, a meaningless fuzz of ancient history, they inherit a perfect, sterile peace. And that peace is lethal. The neocortex, denied the complex computations of social maneuvering and conflict resolution, begins to atrophy from disuse. You don't get bored. You get extinct. We talk about the will to live. But what if that will is nothing more than a cocktail of dopamine and oxytocin triggered by successful social interaction or competitive triumph? Remove the triggers. What remains? Only the primal, inefficient structures beneath, which were never designed to sustain a complex consciousness alone. The last human will experience a psychological descent that modern science hasn't even named yet, precisely because we depend on others to define what sanity is. Their definition of reality will detach from any shared reference point, spiraling into a subjective chaos that makes true isolation unbearable. The final brain cells won't die from radiation or lack of sustenance. They will die from being unable to justify the energy they consume. The last thought won't be, I am alone. It will be, why am I still running? The legs stop. The engine sputters. This is not tragedy. This is efficient deactivation. The true cost of consciousness is constant, exhausting maintenance. You think the group exists for comfort? Utter nonsense. The tribe is not a warm blanket. It is a necessary, frustrating friction machine, grinding away at individual delusion to maintain a shared, functional lie we call consensus reality. Every glance you exchange, every subtle negotiation over who speaks next, who holds the perceived power, who gets the better chair, this is the real neurological workout. This is the gym for the prefrontal cortex. We are information junkies, desperately seeking the signal that we matter in relation to the others, mapping our status every 6 seconds. Take away the mirror, take away the group, and the ego loses its crucial reference points. It dissipates, it vanishes. The greatest enemy of the advanced human brain is not shortage of food, but shortage of necessary complexity. If you are waiting for the noble, solitary sage to arise after the collapse, you are waiting for a fiction written by people who have never sat in genuine, lasting silence. The silence doesn't bring peace. It brings the unbearable roar of self-interrogation without external validation. If you prefer the soft lie, the comforting myth of the heroic survivor humming a brave tune to the empty stars, then you should stop watching right now. But if you are among the minority who prefers the cold, hard wiring diagram of the human operating system over sentimental fluff, who values the harsh truth over cozy comfort, then you belong here, confronting these difficult mechanics. Now consider the inherent antagonism. You look at history and see chaos, war, and endless conflict. You think, if only we could achieve perfect peace. You should be terrified of perfect peace. Conflict is the engine. It is the brutal, essential pressure release valve that defines who we are and who we are not. Without external threat, the invading army, the competing corporation, the political rival, we are neurologically compelled to invent an internal one. The mind demands high-stakes computation. If you are not actively fighting for resources, you are fighting for status. If you are not fighting for status, you are fighting the shadow of your own impending irrelevance. You, the person watching this, are wired for this low-grade, simmering antagonism. Don't waste energy denying it. You check the news for disruption. You scroll through social media looking for someone, anyone, to secretly judge, to place below you in the mental hierarchy. This constant, almost unconscious act validates your own precarious position. It stabilizes your ego. Remove the target, the threat, the perceived competitor, and the entire system becomes dangerously unstable. The ammunition turns inward. The isolation does not grant freedom. It creates psychosis by demanding that the brain perform two impossible tasks simultaneously, acting as the solitary input source and the sole validation mechanism. This is cognitive quicksand. A healthy mind requires an antagonist, not necessarily an enemy wielding a sword, but a system of necessary friction, a counterpoint to prove its own function. We maintain sanity by offloading chunks of our reality definition onto others. We outsource the responsibility of defining normal. When you are alone, the definition of the self begins to blur, not slowly, but in sudden, terrifying perceptual shifts. The brain starts to mistake background static for intentional signals. Paranoia isn't a lapse in judgment. It's the lonely brain desperately manufacturing the complex social data it requires to justify its own processing power. It prefers the threat of a stalker to the crushing, empty clarity of nothing at all. The last human won't starve to death from a lack of nutrition. They will starve their cortex to death from a lack of argument. They will become a biological vessel housing an increasingly simplistic, panicked machine. And here is the psychological trap that guarantees failure. We were built for collective memory, not individual archiving. The memories of the last human will decay rapidly, not because the storage medium fails, but because there is no one to narrate them to. Memory, deep memory, is fundamentally a social performance. You tell the story, Someone acknowledges it, and that acknowledgement reinforces the neural pathways. Without the audience, the narrative collapses. It becomes internal noise. The grand history of the species, once stored in libraries and shared myths, shrinks down to an unverified, meaningless whisper inside one failing skull. Will they even remember the concept of a shared future? I sincerely doubt it. The temporal scope collapses. They stop planning for next week, then tomorrow, then the next hour. All action becomes purely reflexive, animalistic. The last phase is not one of mournful reflection or philosophical despair. It is the final pathetic retreat of a complex system that can no longer justify the resources necessary for self-awareness. It's metabolic austerity meeting existential dread. This is the reality behind the romantic notion of the solitary end. This is the cold, clean mechanics of failure. The language starts to rot first. It doesn't dissolve with a dramatic flourish or a sudden silence. It just loses its tensile strength. Why conjugate a verb when only the root matters? Why use metaphor when the reality is crude, present, and undeniable? You won't need the future perfect tense. No one is listening. The complex architecture of human communication, all those auxiliary verbs, all that subjunctive mood, was built purely for projection, for the hypothetical world we agreed to share. You eliminate the other person. You eliminate the necessity of if. Grammar becomes irrelevant static. Speech degrades into pure, desperate, functional noise. Raw data exchange. The rich, textured tapestry of semantics shrinks to a thin, functional wire, purely reactive. They will be surrounded by the artifacts of millions of years of linguistic evolution. Books, recordings, digital archives, and none of it will compute. The meaning has evaporated, leaving only the sound. They won't read philosophy. They will scan nutritional labels, if those even exist. Now, this is the point where most documentaries pull their punch, slipping back into comfortable, sanitized historical analysis. We don't do that here. We deal only in the mechanisms hidden underneath the hood of reality. If you are tired of the shallow consensus and demand the clarity of inconvenient truths, if you believe that understanding the system is the only way to avoid becoming the product, then you already know what to do. You belong with us. Only committed listeners understand the true depth of the descent. The ultimate horror is not merely solitude. It is the absolute relativity of existence that follows. The human brain is a superlative abstraction engine. It creates concepts like justice, honor, stock market, and next Tuesday. All of these are ghosts held in place by social consensus. Consensus is gone. The ghosts vanish. The last human cannot hold on to nation. They cannot hold on to law. They certainly cannot hold on to the value of $1. The only thing left is the physical, the immediate, the terrifyingly real stone beneath their foot. They lose the ability to assign conceptual value to anything beyond immediate survival utility. Why save that painting? It's cold outside. Burn it. Immediate warmth wins the argument, always. The brain needs comparison points. Without another conscious witness to say, yes, the sky is blue, even sensory input becomes suspect. You there, you are the last arbiter of your world's color palette right now. Imagine that responsibility failing. Is the sky blue? Or is that just a temporary, failing firing pattern in a dying machine? Doubt poisons perception. The world becomes entirely subjective, and when the world is entirely subjective, it ceases to be real in any meaningful external way. It becomes a permanent, self-generated dream state, indistinguishable from psychosis. Pure ainda, the tools of introspection become unusable. We use metaphors to understand our feelings. I feel heavy. I am light. The situation is murky. These are tools crafted through millennia of shared poetry and shared pain. When the last human tries to understand their paralyzing terror, they will find their language empty of the symbolic resonance required for diagnosis. They will only register the physical symptoms: fast heartbeat, cold sweat. They are suffering immensely, but they lack the dictionary to name the suffering. This isn't tragedy, it's pure, cold thermodynamics. The system is closed, energy dissipates, complexity collapses. The last great act of humanity will be the erasure of its own operating manual, line by painful line. That last mind won't be philosophical. It will be frantic. It will be scared of shadows. It will be devastatingly simple. You think the complexity of your current anxiety is a burden? Wait until you only have the complexity of a squirrel to process it with. The collapse of the internal world precedes the collapse of the external structure. That last human will walk past treasures, past the cure for every disease, past the blueprints for flight, past the final definitive answer to the universe, and will not notice. Their vision is too narrow, their hunger too immediate, their survival too taxing. The romantic image is wrong. It is not an epic final stand. It is just the slow, silent surrender of a mind that has forgotten how to be human, long before the body finally gives out. We were never really human anyway. We just learned better disguises. Every ethical framework, every soaring sonata, every architectural marvel. They are all just incredibly complicated tools crafted for group cohesion, instruments of mass-scale cooperation, designed to keep the apex predator from cannibalizing itself. Remove the group, remove the pressure to maintain the facade, and the tool rusts instantly. What remains? Meat, pure reaction, unfiltered fear. The truth is, you are not a seeker of truth or beauty. You are an organism whose core mandate is optimizing calorie intake and avoiding immediate structural damage. That's the deepest evolutionary truth we spend our entire lives running from. But that last human? They stop running. They fall back into the primal mud, not out of choice but out of necessity. Their operating system downgrades itself for efficiency. They are forced to become the very thing they spent millennia rising above. A sophisticated ape, exquisitely sensitive to shadows, driven solely by instinct. Now look closer at the sheer agony of that reversion. Imagine the cognitive dissonance. Their brain, still genetically programmed with the capacity to understand quantum mechanics, is now desperately trying to categorize a loose floorboard as either a threat or a potential food source. The complexity doesn't vanish. It becomes noise. They walk through the ruins of a library, the sum total of all human knowledge, and all they register is the uncomfortable feeling of dust on their tongue, and the faint, overwhelming scent of decay. That is the tragedy of high intelligence when its supportive structure vanishes. The mind designed to traverse galaxies cannot tolerate the silence of its own collapse. The environment becomes hostile again, not because the planet is fighting back, but because their perception has narrowed. The skyscraper they once admired as a feat of engineering transforms into a terrifying, irregular cliff face that might hide a predator. Too many straight lines, too much glass. It triggers an ancient, buried alarm. The modern world becomes a continuous neurological assault because the filtering mechanisms of culture, of shared meaning, are gone. Every sound is a threat. Every shadow is potential danger. Paranoia isn't madness in this context. It is simply the appropriate evolutionary threat assessment when the safety net of civilization has been shredded. Their emotions? Simplified, brutal. We tend to think of existential suffering as requiring complex thought. Wrong. The pain is purely chemical now. When they experience loss, they don't mourn the symbolic significance of the memory. They register a sudden, painful withdrawal of oxytocin and serotonin. They feel the absence of the pack. They feel the cold, hard biological panic of being utterly alone, disconnected from the energy source of collective warmth. It's the feeling of being born too early, except this is being born too late. This is the failure of the ape. the final whimper of a species that specialized too narrowly in abstraction. We needed complexity to survive complexity. When the surrounding complexity dissolved, our specialization became a lethal liability. We designed ourselves into a corner, didn't we? That last mind is simply an evolutionary overshoot, a spectacular design failure being recalled by the universe. When that body finally gives out, it won't be a spiritual release. It will be the final, necessary entropy of a processor that ran out of external input and simply began to devour its own code, one frantic, meaningless thought after another. The ultimate verdict is this. Humanity's end wasn't an epic war against nature or machine. It was quiet, pathetic, and agonizingly simple. The mind choked on its own intelligence. It simply forgot how to be an ape without an audience. They say the human mind is infinitely powerful. Liars. It is actually a fragile, over-engineered piece of garbage that requires relentless external maintenance and constant validation. You do not need a bomb to shatter consciousness. Just remove the echo chamber. Just take away the walls that tell you where your body ends and the world begins. This is the lesson of every isolation study ever conducted. You know the stories. The deep-sea divers pushed past the limits of nitrogen narcosis, the Arctic explorers marooned for months in absolute white silence, the poor bastards locked in solitary confinement in Soviet prisons. What was the common denominator of their collapse? They didn't achieve Zen mastery. They found the static, the slow, creeping entropy of a mind disconnected from its essential anchor. Your brain, operating in a vacuum, starts eating its own memories for fuel, simply because the input stream is mandatory. The self is not some fixed soul. It's an illusion built entirely on repetition, built on mirrors. When the mirrors go dark, the image distorts. Fast. Ever heard of the experiment where volunteers were paid a fortune to spend just 48 hours in a dark, soundproof room, floating in tepid water? Sensory deprivation. 15 minutes in, some were already screaming for release. Why? Because the machine realized it was running without purpose. It had no context, so it created context. It fabricated a reality. Auditory hallucinations, tactile sensations, visions of pure dread. A reality far more terrifying than the empty dark. This is not philosophical freedom, my friends. This is the biological panic of a server disconnecting from the mainframe, attempting to execute the entire network protocol based purely on cached data. Now, look closely at that broken mind we discussed earlier, the one wandering the post-civilization wasteland. Scale that sensory deprivation tank up. Scale it to the size of a global society that has substituted true, meaningful interaction with the synthetic friction of the internet. We are all, right now, sitting in a global isolation tank constructed of digital static and meaningless noise. The external world is screaming, but it's screaming nonsense. It offers no survival information, no communal truth, only an endless stream of non-contextualized data points. The internal mechanism, starved of real shared meaning, the kind that validates our place in the hierarchy and guides our hands toward a shared future, starts to fabricate its own internal apocalypse. That's why we obsess over the simulated friction of celebrity gossip, or the utterly fictionalized moral clarity of political wars fought online. We crave a signal. We need structure. If reality doesn't provide the high-stakes structure required to justify our complex processing power, we generate the catastrophic fiction that kills us. We are generating vast, self-referential complexity just to mask the external void, just to justify the survival of this ridiculous, over-smart ape. Don't tell me we are evolving toward anything greater. We are living proof that structure is not the enemy of freedom. Structure is the absolute precondition for sanity. Without a strong, reliable, shared reality to push back against, the mind simply falls inward, a black hole of self-reflection. We built the perfect engine for navigating a complex environment only to destroy the map. And now? Now we drive blind, faster and faster, convinced that the noise in our own heads is the sound of the universe answering. It is the sound of the processor eating itself alive. This is the final, pathetic masterpiece of human intelligence, the ability to manufacture its own, utterly meaningless demise. We obsess over the metrics. The algorithm demands optimization. You think you're working toward something better? Nonsense. You are merely calibrating the speed of your personal collapse. This relentless obsession with productivity, the hustle culture, the relentless tracking of every breath, every calorie, every minute spent leveraging something. This is not the path to success. It is merely a sophisticated avoidance mechanism. It is the terrified mind trying to prove its worth to a universe that stopped asking for its resume a decade ago. We build streamlined, optimized lives because complexity requires meaningful choices, and meaningful choices require confronting the possibility of fundamental, irredeemable failure. But fundamental failure is what we cannot face, because if the whole infrastructure of meaning collapses, we lose the excuse for existing. So we keep moving. Faster, faster. Don't mistake motion for momentum. You, sitting there, checking your phone every 90 seconds, organizing your digital desktop, optimizing your sleep schedule to gain 3 extra minutes of waking efficiency, you are running on a treadmill leading absolutely nowhere. Why? Because being still means hearing the terrible silence. The silence whispers the hidden truth, that all your complex activity is just static. All your tracking data is just noise. If you stop moving, if you turn off the content, you are suddenly left alone with the terrifying vast space where community, shared faith, and real purpose used to be. That void is unsustainable, so we fill it with busyness. We become experts in micro-efficiency, totally blind to macro-pointlessness. Now, listen close. This is the ultimate con. The system that has destroyed shared reality is the exact system now offering you the tools to master reality. You are being sold the spiritual equivalent of a broken map and a dead compass, then told you are a pioneer because you paid extra for the premium GPS subscription. Will you ever question the premise? Will you ever look up from the screen and ask if the metrics you are optimizing even belong to your life, or if they belong only to the machine? I sincerely doubt it. The feedback loop is too sweet. The dopamine hit of a minor accomplishment in a digital space is immediate, cheap, and totally addictive. Real life offers friction, delay, and uncertainty. The screen offers fake control. We choose the fake control every single time. We have become behavioral rats, happily pressing the lever until we dehydrate, congratulating ourselves on our amazing rat efficiency. This pathological outsourcing of identity to quantifiable metrics, call it personal branding, call it side hustle culture, it's just ritualistic self-sacrifice to the data gods. You are turning yourself into a reliable data node. Nothing more. The only value you retain is the consistency of your engagement. The irony. We sacrificed our sense of shared, objective truth, the foundation of sanity, in the name of individual expression and freedom. But the result is the opposite. Total conformity to the rules of digital visibility. If you aren't posting, you don't exist. If you aren't optimizing, you are falling behind. This isn't freedom. This is the most pervasive, invisible prison ever constructed, built entirely from our own desperate need for validation. It's genius, truly. The warden doesn't need to lock the doors. We stay in the cage because that's where the power bar is charged. And the final toxic manifestation of this inward collapse? The inability to trust anything external. When the mind is self-referential, when it only hears its own feedback loop, it becomes fundamentally paranoid. Every external signal, whether a scientific consensus, a political statement, or even a shared cultural reference, is immediately categorized not as information, but as a hostile narrative demanding immediate, personalized rejection. We didn't just lose shared reality. We lost the capacity for shared trust. We destroyed the operating system that allows complex human society to function. The mutual agreement that objective facts exist, regardless of our feelings about them. Now, we are simply nodes of screaming, self-validated opinions, each convinced the other 7.9 billion people are hallucinating. This is not sustainable. This is the sound of the entire processor reaching thermal overload, and no amount of optimized scheduling is going to save us now. The lights are flickering, the system is crashing. We told ourselves we mastered the environment, but the environment we actually mastered was the digital noise, and it is killing us softly, sweetly, and completely. We built the perfect digital cage and then demanded the key so we could lock ourselves inside. Pathetic and final. This meltdown, this systemic failure of consensus, is not a moral failing. Forget morality. This is just physics applied to biochemistry. Here is the painful, ugly truth. We are still just advanced apes, driven by the most ancient, primitive wiring. The ape needs the group. The ape needs validation from the group to guarantee survival, to secure resources, to pass on its pathetic little genes. Our deep brain doesn't care about objective facts or philosophical nuance. It cares about inclusion. It cares about status. It cares about the nod of approval from the dominant member of the troop. And what did Silicon Valley do? They weaponized the nod. They refined that ancient survival mechanism, the craving for social acceptance, into a relentless, infinite loop of digital sugar. They made the like button the most efficient reward signal in the history of stimulus and response. We are not weak. We are simply predictable. You cannot blame a dog for wanting the perfect treat, and you cannot blame the modern brain for wanting the perfect dopamine spike. The systems are designed to bypass the prefrontal cortex, the seat of reason, and hit the lizard brain directly. We don't post to inform, we post to perform. We don't scroll to learn, we scroll to measure our worth against the perfected, filtered, and ultimately false performances of others. This is the greatest mass behavioral experiment in history, and the result is horrifyingly simple. We are training ourselves to become the most compliant, emotionally fragile, and intellectually stunted generation of humans ever recorded. We traded the messy, complex, slow reward of real mastery, becoming truly competent at something difficult, for the cheap, instantaneous, worthless junk food of synthetic attention. We starve ourselves in reality just to feast in the void. It's pathetic. But here is the final evolutionary irony, the devastating punchline. The very tool we created to enhance communication has rendered communication impossible. You can't negotiate with a dopamine addict who believes his next hit is a transcendent truth. You can't build a viable society when everyone's primary loyalty is to their personalized feedback loop. What happens when the collective delusion requires actual, tangible resource allocation? What happens when the optimized performance of digital authenticity meets the sharp, unforgiving edge of physical reality? Look around, it's already happening. The lights are flickering not because the machines failed, but because the biological nodes operating them achieved perfect synchronization with manufactured noise. The verdict? We failed the test. Evolution selects for traits that promote survival, and in this new digital ecosystem, we have selected for vanity, conformity, and terminal short-sightedness. We are not evolving. We are domesticating ourselves, trimming the edges of our complexity and curiosity until we fit perfectly into the rectangular dimensions of the screen. We have successfully bred ourselves into a state of beautiful, optimized impotence. We confuse attention for affection. We confuse visibility for validity. We are no longer seekers of truth. We are just sophisticated attention farmers, trapped in the fields we ourselves sowed. We convinced ourselves that endless, noisy self-expression equaled freedom. It never did. It was just a different kind of cage. And this one is the most secure ever devised because it has no bars. We pay to stay inside. So the system will not be fixed by better algorithms. It will not be saved by regulation. The crash is inevitable because the architecture of the human mind was incompatible with the infinite stimuli of the digital infinite. We are biological machines reaching thermal overload, convinced that the smoke rising from the chassis is actually genius. The only question that matters now is this. When the noise finally dies, when the lights shut down and the screen goes black, what will you have left? Who will you be when there's no one left to watch? The silence is